Hi.
Greetings. We're on page 149 of Crisis of Conscience, Ray Franz. Ray has just made the point that the real date that was emphasized at the beginning of the Watchtower movement was 1881. So Watchtower starts 1879, and you're thinking 2 years in the future something's going to happen.
Yeah.
We made the point last time that therefore 1914 is the third disappointment. What was the first? 1874. You thought something would happen visibly then, it didn't, so you recast what it means. You're going to have to do the same with 1881, and then you're going to do the same with 1914.
And I think an important thing was that he didn't know any of this stuff before. This was new information for Ray.
Yes, it was.
He stumbled across this and started reading the old publications and finding out stuff. And he's in the governing body, and he doesn't know.
Yeah. Now, he's read to us part of the 1881 Watchtower on this issue of what should happen between 1874 and 1881. And don't forget that this idea of parallel dispensations is everywhere in the Watchtower point of view in those days, which is there's a parallel between the 7 years of Christ and the apostles, between his baptism and the cutting off of Israel. And there's a parallel to that today between 1874 and 1881. Now, he develops that here. He says, the real anchor date for the Watchtower then was clearly 1874. As of that date, Christ was present. Within the following 40 years, he would accomplish all his harvest work. So you can see the parallel there, which is 40 years from the beginning to the end. That is the destruction of Jerusalem. So that's 1914 in the parallelism, right? So everything's going to end in 1914. It's the end of Armageddon, not just the harvest work. Because of believing this, it was felt that dramatic events should be taking place very quickly, perhaps in that very year of 1881, as argued in the additional article headed, How Long, O Lord? Note these points. Now here's a direct quote from that 1881 article. Don't forget, he's only 29 years old at this point, right? This is a question doubtless that many ask themselves. That is, how soon will our change come? This change many of us have looked forward to for years, and we yet with much pleasure think of the time when we shall be gathered unto Jesus and see him as he is. In the article concerning our change in December paper, that must be the previous December 1880, we expressed the opinion that it was nearer than many supposed. While we would not attempt to prove our change at any particular time, yet we propose looking at some of the evidences which seem to show the translation or change from the natural to the spiritual condition due this side or by the fall of our year 1881.
Wow.
The evidence that our change will be by that time increases, since we have seen that the change to spiritual bodies is not the marriage. They're looking forward to the marriage of the Lamb, so thinking of Revelation, the last part of Revelation. While we thought the marriage to be the change, and knowing that there was 3.5 years of special favor to the nominal church, now left desolate, from 1878, we could not expect any translation this side of 1881, or during this 3.5 years. But since we recognize that going into the marriage is not only being made ready by recognizing his presence for the change, but also that going in includes the change itself, then the evidences that we go in or will be changed inside of the time mentioned are strong and commend themselves to all interested as worthy of investigation. Now this is what they called them in those days, present truth. These are things nobody knows but us, right? So this is what Christians today would refer to as the rapture, an invisible rapture, not a physical, visible resurrection, but a rapture of the saints to heavenly life.
So we continue in the quote. Aside from any direct proof that our change is near, the fact that the manner of the change can now be understood is evidence that we are near the time of the change, for truth is meet in due season, and understood only as due. It will be remembered that after the spring of 1878, when we understand Jesus was due as king, that the subject of holiness or the wedding garment was very much agitated, and aside from the parallel to the end of the Jewish age and favor at that time being shown to the Jewish nation, which implied the presence of the king, the consideration of the wedding garment was also proof of the correctness of the application, for the king had come to see the guests, and hence all were interested in knowing how they stood before him. Now, as the inspection of guests is the last thing prior to our change, which precedes the marriage, and we are all now considering the change, it would seem that the time for it is nigh. We shall now present what we adduce from the types and prophetic points as seeming to indicate the translation of the saints and the closing of the door to the high calling by 1881.
So where are they getting all these present truths from? Types, parallelisms, they assume, with the first century, and chronology.
Yeah.
All of this present truth is about those things. It's all deduced from not the surface data of the New Testament, but from assumptions about these three areas: types, parallels, and chronology.
Yeah.
And most of this has been abandoned now, but very interesting, they've kept the idea that there was a 7-year period between the beginning of Christ's ministry and the cutting off of Israel when Stephen was murdered. They've got that one locked in still, because you can't test that one, can you?
I think too this idea of they use the same text as they still use, that this is truth in meat in due season. They will hang on to that, and they will talk about the past as well. That was just what they were ready for then. But it's attached to something that wasn't true. That means it has nothing to do with truth.
If it was meat, it was
it's
tainted
not
meat.
Present truth.
It was rancid.
It present lie.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
It was not meat in due season provided by the Lord, obviously. This is men's prognostications based on men's assumptions.
So Ray had concluded after this quote by saying, detailed argumentation followed, with emphasis on the fall of 1881 as the likely time for their change to heavenly life, and the time when the door, opportunity to become a member of the bride, will close. This would be 35 years before 1914, which to them was simply a terminal point, the time by which all things would wind up.
And as we said elsewhere, the 1914 date is also tied up with the idea of the ransom has to be applied, and until we're all in heaven, the ransom is not complete. We are part of the ransom sacrifice.
Yeah.
So they all have to be in heaven by 14, which explains why they're not doubly disappointed when we get to 1914, but triply disappointed. Because many of these people had survived the 1874 disappointment and were witness to this one.
Yeah.
What's our link?
You can read it.
Oh yeah, Carl Olaf Johnson and Ruth Persson. We did a video based on their second book. That is Johnson's second book, Sign of the Last Days, where they talk about this parallel between the secret rapture idea of dispensational Protestantism and the invisible presence notion of Russell, and a lot more during this very Adventist period. See you next time.